Sacred Instructions. It is said that the rishi and his disciple were last together around 1860 near Shiva's classical city of Thanjavur, where they stayed several weeks at a private temple. Our creative narrator peers back through the mists of time to pen the following story based on the culture of the day. Leaving the holy town on the road south from Madras, the capital, they passed a large estate. A well-dressed man came out from the house and hurried forward to meet them. Saluting them in all reverence, he introduced himself as the landlord, and enthused that he had seen his visitors in a dream the night before, the two of them sitting in his family shrine, and had been waiting all morning, hoping they might appear. He begged them to accept his hospitality for as long as they pleased. They walked with him up to the house, a palatial mansion, to be met at the door by a host of excited servants. The landlord washed their feet himself, offering handfuls of flowers he had gathered just in case his dream was prophetic. He took his guests inside and introduced his family. Afterwards, he showed the way to his family's private temple, across a wide courtyard behind the house. It was a pillared hall with a high roof, the outside painted with traditional red and white stripes, the building surrounded by bilva and mango trees. Inside the hall was a small stone shrine. "This temple is as old as I am," he exclaimed with a sweeping gesture of his arm. "My grandfather built it while I was a boy. My father worked very hard on it, too." Within the shade of the portico sat a small stone Nandi, which the landlord bowed to fondly as they passed. The shrine was flawless and scrupulously clean. Teakwood doors swung open to reveal a floor of polished granite and walls almost covered over with superb wooden and plaster carvings of sacred import. The Shiva Lingam in the sanctum was bedecked with garlands of flowers and crowned with jewels. The pujari had just left, and the air was full of incense. The wealth of the owner was evident. All the puja articles were of silver and gold, the bell, the trays, even the hanging pot above the lingam. The atmosphere was quiet and sublime, a world unto itself. A thin Brahmin had walked in through a side door. He withdrew as soon as he saw them, but the landlord called him back. "This is Ramesh," he informed his two guests. "His father has been the priest here for many years, and Ramesh will take his place one day." Their host showed them through the rest house he maintained for pilgrims, and offered them anything they wanted from a storeroom full of supplies. Water pots, veshtis, shawls, umbrellas, mats, walking sticks, fans, sandals, trays. Every conceivable pilgrimage item was there, from needles to blankets, even a small basket overflowing with large rupee coins. "There is no counting the devotees of the Lord that pass this way in the dry months," he explained. "They go on to Thanjavur and Chidambaram, and often they return through here as well. Our family has always tried to look after them as best we can." He paused for a moment, then quickly added, "Of course this is not the pilgrimage season. You will be alone here. No one will disturb you." Outside, he showed them the family well, its wooden bucket hanging above the 12-foot wide stone-lined opening in the earth, and again turned to them with folded hands. "It is a very great honor for me to serve you," he said. "You must rest here for a while. Stay as you please. This is a duty given me by Shiva to do. You cannot refuse." Against his childlike sincerity and imploring looks, they could not, and he was elated. He bowed once more, announced that their first meal would arrive in minutes, and marched off to the house without looking back. They stayed for a week at this little temple. No one else was there. No one disturbed them. They suspected other guests had been softly sent away. Within the solid stone walls of the shrine, no thought of the outside world, no memory of anything other than Shiva could intrude, and in this blissful atmosphere they felt free to undertake the pilgrimage to the heights of consciousness without concern for the events of the day. They sat through most of the night and day in deep meditation. Each morning they would bathe at the well. Its cold, clear waters poured from the bucket onto head and body, and walk around a bit, after which the rishi would talk to his disciple, giving him strong instructions and insights that would carry him through the rest of his life. After the noon meal, they would sleep for several hours and then return to their meditations as the tropical sun waned. They sat for hours together in deep inner communion, in perfect harmony. The only words between them were the rishis, and those were intermittent. He told his disciple that he would go to Yalpanam, the northern peninsula of Sri Lanka, but to wait until he received his inner orders. It is a place where the Shaivite path is followed more strictly than anywhere else in the world. Recently there has been a falling away there due to Western influence, but it is not destroyed. With hard work the path can be re-established. The people are pure, they cherish their traditions, they live the Shaivite path, but they do not know the spirit of Shiva. His power and presence sleeps within them. Their lives run on in the orthodox ways, but the depths of things are closed to them. They have forgotten that the strict Shaiva culture is a vehicle for spiritual unfoldment. Go there and revive the spirit, show them, tell them, be a worker of miracles. You will have more siddhis than you even know about. You will work wonders, live long and have many disciples. The people there will try to catch you and hold you, but don't let them. When you have done your work, for their sake shake them off. There will be many to claim you, but few to understand or appreciate what you do for them, and fewer still to ask for what you alone can give. The others will come to you for everything. Give them everything they need. Thus you will leave nothing undone. The Rishi spoke of the being who would eventually inherit his disciple's spiritual mantle. He would be quiet, crystal pure, but he would act as if he were a madman. Teach others your siddhis, he admonished, but give the gems of jnana only to this one. By his guise of madness he will preserve the power of the guru lineage during foreign rule, and pass it along to his disciple. Each day the Rishi would talk like this, giving his disciple detailed instructions. The last day they were together, as they sat before a fire before dawn, he smeared vibhuti abundantly on his disciple's forehead, as is done in Shaiva funeral rites, thus initiating him into the renunciatory life known as sannyasa. Rubbing freshly ground sandalwood paste on the disciple's chest, the Satguru spoke out the initiate's monastic name, Muktiyananda, meaning he who enjoys liberation's bliss. The Rishi reached over and, with focused intent, touched Muktiyananda on the knee, a touch that was never forgotten, and abruptly sent him on his way out into the world to do his work. Muktiyananda stood up, prostrated to his preceptor, and, as instructed, left that minute, and the Rishi remained behind in the temple. The Rishi stayed at the private temple for a few days longer, then he went south, stopping briefly at the Subramanya temple in Tiruchedur, then south to Kanyakumari, a goddess temple at the southern tip of India. He found a niche on the coast and remained there for untold years, experiencing the ever-evolving encounters with Samadhi until he finally left his body. Muktiyananda sails to Sri Lanka. Jaffna, which had once boasted its own king, was culturally and spiritually under siege. Over the past 2 centuries it had fallen under the successive dominion of a triumvirate, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British. These bands of colonizers came to this idyllic island to extend their hegemony, political, business, and religious. Many churches were built in and around Jaffna, and Hindu temples were destroyed in the process. The need for a spiritual leader was never greater. Muktiyananda made his way from South India to Ceylon, as he was instructed, though that sounds easier than it actually was. On foot for hundreds of kilometers, he reached India's southern shore sometime in the 1860s. Though a Tamil legend claims he magically flew across the 65-kilometer-wide Palk Strait, biographers tell us he came by more mundane means. In Ilathu Sitharkal, translated as Cedars of Elam, author Muthayar narrates, "In those days, Urkavaltharai, Kites in northern Ceylon was an important port. Big ships used to come from India to Ceylon. Eluvaitivu is the first place that ships sailing to Sri Lanka from Nagapattinam in India will see. Muktiyananda reached Urkavaltharai on a ship like this. From Urkavaltharai, he walked all the way to Jaffna. The first place he stayed was Mandaitivu. Mandaitivu is an island off the Jaffna Peninsula that measures 800 meters by 3.2 kilometers. It became a spiritually awakened place due to Swami's presence. Even today, the island is known for its spiritual prowess and Shiva temples. When Swami landed, he met a man named Naniyar, who let the stranger stay in a hut near his home. It became Swami's abode. The hermitage had a cow-dung floor and plaster walls, with a coconut wood roof covered with thatched palm fronds. His bed was a small wooden platform, oddly just 1.25 meters long. Even today, there are remnants of his years there, including his bed, and residents of the area still fondly recall their great-grandfather's stories of his presence. Before Muktiyananda sailed to Ceylon, a Chettiar named Vairamuthu had seen him at a temple in South India and invited him to come back with him to Sri Lanka. Muktiyananda replied, "You go, I will come." One day, Swami showed up at Vairamuthu's home in Jaffna. When the wife and her husband was at the temple, Swami asked for some food and instructed her to set a banana leaf also for her husband. As soon as the wife was finished serving the visitor, her husband walked in and Swami offered, "Sit and eat." Ultimately, Vairamuthu gave Swami his horse and all his wealth and became a sadhu himself, known as Chinnaswami. Swami made the home into an ashram called Kantharmadam, Anathanasataran, near Nallur, and with the money created an endowment to feed devotees every day. Walking the 6 kilometers to Jaffna from Mandaitivu on the sandy isthmus became Kadait Swami's daily habit. Entering the market to give forth his spiritual wisdom, he would return to Mandaitivu in the evening, or stay in Jaffna, making camp on the steps of the Vanarpanai Shivan temple or staying at the nearby public rest house. In subsequent years, he made use of centers built by his devotees in Usan, Kantharmadam, and Urlalai, where a bed and basic food was provided for pilgrims. Muktiyananda was a mysterious sadhu for whom there is no written record and no photograph, only a few crude artistic sketches. However, it is known that he had been a high court judge in the state of Karnataka, and that he had mastered English, Sanskrit, Kannada, and Tamil. His close devotees knew that he had taken the robes of a sannyasin due to a deep-seated change of heart. There is speculation, unsubstantiated, that Muktiyananda was given sannyasa diksha by Sri Narasimha Bharati, 32nd Shankaracharya of the Mysore Sringeri Math. In Siddhars of Elam and Muthaya observed, between 1817 and 1879, Sri Narasimha Bharati was the 32nd leader of the Mysore Sringeri Monastery's Sankaracharya Pitham. He was a great Siddhar who created many jnanis, yogis, Siddhars, and Jivamuktas. During his 62-year tenure, 40 years were spent outside, i.e. traveling. His last 12 years were spent in spiritual service in Tamil Nadu. Together with his primary disciple and fellow Siddhar, Sri Sachidananda Shiva, he traveled from village to village to create spiritual awakening among the people. At such an opportunity, the judge became Swami Muktiyananda. An early biographer, Brahmasri A. Subramania Iyer, 1857 to 1912, wrote that Muktiyananda was born in 1810. Swami told the people of Jaffna precious little about himself. He told them that he had been sent to Jaffna by a rishi who had come down from the Himalayas, a man who ate among the crows. Muktiyananda ate with the crows. When he sat alone on the ground under a tree, crows would gather nearby, watching for scraps from the meal. It is said that he ate and drank almost anything that was given to him. Marketplace Monarch. Muktiyananda spent his days at Jaffna Grand Bazaar, walking about or sitting under a huge shade-giving banyan tree. The shops on the northern and western streets of this marketplace belong mainly to the Chettiars, or trading community. Muktiyananda did not say his name, so people took to referring to him as Kadait Swami. Kadai means shop in the Tamil language, so his name simply meant the Swami who frequents the marketplace. It is common in Tamil culture to name holy men after places, for they often do not let people know any other name. History also knows him as Adikadai Nathan, Lord of the Marketplace. Kadait Swami would go to a shop and take a piece of bread. While they might object to such filching by an ordinary customer, shopkeepers were always pleased to relinquish a little of their stock to the Swami, for they had come to learn that business was bountiful on days he visited. They would even pray that the tall sadhu might come and help himself to something. People observed, and these small signs gave them faith in the Swami, faith in his powers to bless and magically influence the world around him. That is one reason Chalapaswami, his future disciple, was not as popular in Jaffna, for he refused to perform such miracles. Muthayar shares the following. Sometimes Swami would dance in the market, and on occasion enter a stall and touch the coins. It soon became known that this brought prosperity to the proprietor, and every merchant waited eagerly for him to enter their premises and give his blessing. But not everyone received it. At times Swami would take a handful of coins and run down the road like a madman, with many kids running after him. Suddenly he might run around and throw the money in the air, dancing in joy as the children rushed to pick up the coins. The real-life stories of Kadait Swami are full of miraculous happenings and healings. Chroniclers allege that he turned honey into arak and arak into honey. It was claimed that he never used a toilet or had to. Decades later, his disciple's disciple, Yogaswami, told his disciples that Kadait Swami performed more miracles than were attributed to Krishna. One day, Yogaswami narrated, Kadait Swami came upon a dead and decomposing cat, touched it with his foot, and commanded it to get up. The cat came to life and walked away. Muthayar narrates another story. Thandel of Valvetithurai, a devotee of Swami, went to see him at Vanarpanai. Hearing that Swami had gone to Mandaitivu, he set out walking there. It was high noon, and the sandy path soon became so hot that his legs and body were burning. Unable to tolerate it, he shouted, "I can't stand the heat, Gurunatha." At that moment, Swami was lying on his bed in Mandaitivu, got up and shouted, "Terrible, terrible, I can't stand the heat." He told one of his devotees to open an umbrella and shade his feet. The devotee did so without understanding why. After some time, Swami told him to put the umbrella away. Thandel came in just then, prostrated at Swami's feet, then stood tearfully grateful for Swami's grace. Muktiyananda was described as lean and tall, dressed in a dark veshti, carrying an umbrella under his arm. They say that he was 6 feet 4 inches tall, had curly hair, piercing eyes, and a long pointed nose. His body was gangly but well-formed and of charming appearance. K. Ramachandran provided the following description on a radio talk he gave in the mid-20th century on Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. No photograph of Kadait Swami was ever taken. The pictures of him that now exist, in fact, drawings by an artist who was his devotee. These drawings depict him as having broad shoulders, long hands, and a radiant smile constantly shining on his face. His long nose, lightly hooked at the tip, lent beauty to his face. There was a spring in his brisk, stately walk and humor in his talk that gave charm to his personality, say those who had seen him. He often smoked cigars. People would throw themselves down in an effort to have his cigar spittle land on their back as a blessing. K. Ramachandran noted in his radio talk, "It is said that many are those who had swallowed his saliva and been cured of illness. Some gained cities. A person from Sudumalai became an expert astrologer. Another became a famous medical practitioner. In trying to explain the greatness of Kadai Swami, sage Yoga Swami had said, even if Kadai Swami were to hold hands and dance with naked maidens, he would not lose his composure. Indeed, he is many times greater than even Buddha, Christ, and the rest of them." Perhaps because of the radical behavior of Kadait Swami and his devotees, the most orthodox Shaivites did not closely mix with him, and he no doubt liked it that way. They were strict vegetarians who did Shiva Puja daily and followed a conservative path, while Kadait Swami placed no such rules or restrictions on himself. His heterodoxy reaches a zenith in the tale of his visit to a cremation ground, where, to teach a radical lesson to a shishya, he bit into the charred flesh of a corpse. Such tales of outrageous behavior were proud in insignia of the Nathas, many sadhus in and around Jaffna took Kadait Swami as their preceptor. In their world, such outlandishness was a sign of transcendence of social norms, a certificate of extraordinariness. In addition to Chelapaswami, Kadait Swami had a number of those brahmachari disciples, including Arulambala Swami, Kalundaival Swami, and Shadaivaratha Swami. Arulambala Swami met Kadait Swami as a young child of 2 and followed him from youth. Kadait Swami eventually sent Arulambala Swami to manage the Kanthar Madam Anathatasataran ashram. Kulundaival Swami was a district court secretary who gave up his career to follow Kadait Swami. The Samadhi shrines for Arulambala Swami and Kalundavel Swami are at Kirimalai, where a hall was built in their honor near the Nagoleshwaram Shiva temple. Sadaivaratha Swami went to Kadait Swami with some other children when he was 8 years old. The moment Kadait Swami saw him, he jumped for joy and took him aside, gave him a hug, took off the hat he was wearing and put it on the boy's head, saying, "This is your initiation. One day you will be a fine Swami." The hat given by Kadait Swami was later put in a shrine and received daily puja. 2 other men who gave up their worldly life were Sergeant Swami, also known as Chinnathamba Swami, who renounced his career with the police force, and Vairamuthu Chettiar, Kadait Swami's first Sri Lankan devotee, who met with him in India, eventually renounced the world and became known as Chinnaswami, Miracle of the Iron Rod. Kadait Swami lived life striding through the countryside in various townships, stopping and staying in patterns discernible to no one. As his reputation grew, everyone wanted blessings from him. With the passing years, he had a sizable contingent of devotees, and anecdotes of his miracles were the devotional coin of the kingdom. We could imagine one such blessing based on a true report as follows. Kadait Swami burst into the entrance of a bustling market one day, with shoppers vigorously negotiating for the slightest amounts of everything from flour to fish. Down the road to his right were fresh fruits and vegetables in lavish variety, each kind stacked in neat geometrical pyramids at open stalls tended by the farmer's family. Bullock carts were still lumbering in from the farther fields, laden with the morning's yield. Every region had its market, a giant version of the modern farmer's market, with the growers engaging directly with the buyers in a frenzied melee. In other days, everyone was a locavore. Villagers had no refrigerators, not even ice, so visiting the market was an almost daily chore for every household, and food was always fresh. The age-old drama played out, with the merchants trying to maximize their take and villagers trying to minimize their expenditure. A medley of prepared foods were on display in a separate sector. Pitu, a mixture of rice flour and shredded coconut, steamed in cylindrical bamboo tubes, laid in steaming pots, fresh and ready to eat. The fast food of those days, but much healthier. Idiyappam, known as stringhoppers in English, that strangely wonderful spaghetti pancake-looking treat made of a thick rice flour dough, were being steamed. Dosai and appam were from a fermented batter of rice and dal, were being skillfully cooked on wood-heated iron griddles. Idli, vadai, biryani, uthapam, and upama were all available. Each stall purveyed a plethora of curries along with the obligatory triad of red, green, and cream-colored chutneys, stone ground from fresh coconut and herbs to complement the main dish. Here, at a glance, one could see and enjoy 8,000 years of culinary evolution, which has resulted in the most varied and healthful vegetarian palate on the planet. Shaivites were so uniformly vegetarian in those days that the word for vegetarianism in Tamil is Shaiva. No wonder they mastered the veggie diet, having no fleshy distractions. A man named Kandya was part of a circle of devotees dedicated to Kadait Swami, but the two had never spoken. Suddenly there the Guru stood, an arm's length away, his tall frame towering above the crowd. Looking down at Kandya, Swami spoke in a deep, resonant voice. "I am coming to your home for lunch tomorrow, and I am bringing many guests." It was not a request or a negotiation. Looking up at the improbably tall Swami, Kandya folded his hands together and paused for a moment in the hopes of saying something inviting, yet profound, grateful, and reverent. All he could muster was a lame smile and a barely audible "Yes, Swami." Swami turned around and left without a word. The rumor spread like wildfire. Kandya had been chosen by Swami. Down the lane of stalls, people greeted the news with joy, curiosity, and downright envy. As he wandered home, Kandya's mind wandered to food. He had not eaten a full meal in 5 days. His family had simply sustained themselves on a little dal, the milk of the family cow, and a compassionate neighbor's occasional offerings. They owned the famous CSK coconut oil mill, which was started by Kandya's grandfather, but the business had floundered. They lost their land and had to sell off the family jewelry, all except his wife's tali, wedding pendant. Kandya was too proud to ask anyone for help. How then would he serve the Swami? Reaching home, he was struck by the oddly placed reminders of his old life. The tile floors, a luxury compared to the cow-during floors of neighboring huts, a finely carved chair with a silk cushion, a silver-plated chest with engraved artistry. He lost himself for a moment, remembering how, when times were better, they lived and had servants in a home 5 times this size. Kandya announced to his wife, Ponama, "Swami is coming tomorrow for lunch." Her immediate reaction was enthusiastic, for a spiritual master was about to step foot in her home, but as fast as the smile came to her face, it left when she pondered how to receive him. Turning to her husband, she queried, as diplomatically as possible, "How would you like to receive the Swami?" Her husband said nothing, but handed her a small pile of rupees. Looking at him with love and admiration, the good wife joyfully glanced at the handful of notes, without counting it, and confidently announced, "I will go to the market and be back with the food for tomorrow." An experienced market-goer, she knew the money in her hand was woefully inadequate. Ponama headed for the door, pausing a moment to clutch her tali, the gold pendant worn on a golden chain around the neck of all Hindu wives. Wives never remove this sacred symbol of marriage, and most faithfully worship it each morning. To lose it is considered unthinkably inauspicious. Nevertheless, setting out to the market, Ponama stopped surreptitiously at the goldsmith's shop to pawn the tali for the need of the hour. The next day arrived almost immediately, or so it seemed, since there was so much to do. The couple conscripted their 2 sons to help, and everyone was scrambling. By 1:45 the last of the dishes was ready, kept fresh in the kitchen to be served hot only after the Swami had seated himself on the woven palm mat that served as the dining room. Their scurrying was interrupted by a thundering thump on the door. "Kandya, I have come," and with him a grand following of guests, numbering, according to one biographer, in the hundreds. Ponama grabbed the camphor, Kandya the lamp, and the 2 boys held the tray, as their parents placed the camphor on the lamp and lit it. Kandya opened the door. Hands held in Anjali Mudra, he offered a reverent Vanakam Swamiji, but as they tried to offer the camphor flame in the traditional salute to holy men and women, Swami marched past and into the house. Obviously in good cheer, he gave Kandya a hearty thwack on the back. "It's a fine day, young fellow." Swami sat on the mat prepared for him, indicating not so subtly that there had been enough niceties and he was ready to eat. Taking an unadorned clay basin in one hand and a jug in the other, Ponama poured water over Swami's right hand as he turned it over and flexed his fingers in the cleaning gesture that begins all Tamil meals. Kandya went to the kitchen where, one by one, his wife handed him the items to be served onto the banana leaf in exacting order. Only men would serve a Swami in those days, and the family would only eat after their guests had finished. Ponama had purchased an abundant supply of every savory staple and treat for the large group, but Swami was a big and active man with a matching appetite. As is customary in a Tamil home to this day, the host kept offering his guests more of each item as it disappeared, giving the sense that there was a never-ending supply. "It was a fine meal, Amma," Swami finally announced, folding in half the banana leaf that had been his plate, thus indicating that he was finished. Relieved, Panama relaxed. She literally had nothing more to serve. The next day, Swami visited again, alone this time, and asked Panama to bring a piece of iron. Searching the family compound, she found a rusted piece of iron half hidden in the soil and brought it to Swami. He took the rod in his hands and began to slowly chant, "Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya," then placed it back in her hands, instructing her to clean off the rust, wrap the rod in cloth, and store it away. Abruptly, Swami then stood up and left. It was an odd departure, but Swami was nothing if not eccentric. A bit overwhelmed by it all, the family basked in the aftermath of Swami's presence, so pure, so noble and mysterious. 4 days later, when Panama opened the cupboard, curiosity beguiled her to look at the rod. To her astonishment, it had turned to gold. Her husband had it tested by a goldsmith, and indeed it was solid gold. Tears of joy in their eyes, Kandia and Panama later thanked Swami for his grace. Eventually, they sold the gold rod, and their family business prospered once again. Saving a fisherman. One stormy evening, Swami arrived shortly before dark at the house of a man who owned a fishing boat. The fisherman was not at home, and the Swami acted strangely, so his wife was reluctant to let Swami through her compound gate. So adamantly did he insist that she relented. Entering the front yard, he went to a tree and sat down. About 2 hours later, the wife, who was still waiting up for her husband's return, noticed that Swami was holding a stout pole and sitting on the ground digging in the dirt beside him as if he were trying to push himself along with the makeshift oar, all the while repeating elalo, a word fishermen chant when working together to pull their nets. Yes, she thought, it looks as if he is pretending to row a boat, sitting in the mud in the dark. She went out in the torrential rain and pleaded with Swami to stop, afraid of the weird goings-on in her garden as much as what her husband would say when he came home to find the yard dug up. But Swami would not desist. In fact, amid the intensity of the storm and his work, he seemed not even to hear her. 3 hours passed as the lanky sage performed this strange and strenuous drama. Unable to chase him away, she kept watch from the safety of her home. Finally, the Swami stopped, rose to his feet, and disappeared into the moonless night. The husband did not return until dawn, something that had never happened before. Many local fishermen's wives had lost their husbands to the turbulent sea. The wife was waiting anxiously at the gate when her beloved approached, deeply relieved to see him, but afraid of the scolding he might give her when he saw the yard. Mustering her courage, she shared the tale of the Swami's visit and the wild rowing episode. Hearing this, her husband prostrated at the spot where Swami had been sitting. Only then, disheveled and exhausted, did he go to the open well to bathe. She brewed fresh coffee as he recounted that a severe storm had ravaged the sea just before dusk, capsizing his small boat. Struggling in the churning waters, he grew fatigued and felt death near, but wrestled with all his might to turn the boat aright. It was not working, and he grew weaker with every effort. Suddenly, one of the oars whacked him on the head, knocking him unconscious. When he came to, he found himself clinging to a plank, the boat right side up, nearby, in a becalmed sea. He told his astonished wife of a vision he had just when death seemed certain, a vision of Swami rowing the boat toward him, rescuing him from the sea. He had been saved, he said, by the grace of the Guru. Both marveled at the miraculous interconnectedness of their experiences. They knew they had been touched by something rare and beyond their understanding. For the rest of their lives, they spoke of Kadait Swami's supernatural efforts to save a drowning fisherman. Confounding conduct. One day in the marketplace in Jaffna, Kadait Swami was begging at the stalls when he observed two elderly women stealing from the shops. They would take their concealed produce to the far quarter of the market, put it down on a piece of burlap, and quickly sell it below market price. No one was willing to apprehend the pair. They were surely nags, but they probably needed the money. Deciding their exploit should be stopped, Kadait Swami went after them one afternoon and provided each one a sound beating, one they would not soon forget. A policeman came by as he was knocking their heads together, horrified to see an able-bodied man assaulting two feeble ladies. He arrested Kadait Swami and threw him into jail. In the middle of the night there was a loud commotion in the jail. Kadait Swami was pulling on the bars from inside and shouting at the top of his voice, "Don't fear, I'm here to set you free." He shouted that way for a long time until the jailer came to quiet him forcibly. Arriving at the cell, the jailer found the prisoner had vanished. He searched the yard to no avail. The jailer awakened his superior to notify him of what was happening. When they reached the cell, the two found Kadait Swami asleep inside. The superintendent went back to the bed thinking his jailer was crazy or had had a bad dream. Within minutes the raucous, scofflaws taunting began again. "Don't worry, I will set you free." Running again to the cell, they found it empty. A few minutes later, they saw the Swami sleeping under a tree in the compound. Rushing to catch him, they were mystified by another disappearance. Again they heard him yelling from the cell, shaking the bars. He called out, "Oh, I'm working on it. Soon you will be free." Realizing they could do nothing to contain the man, they let him go. One of the guards was a sergeant named Chinnathambi. In later years, he renounced the world and became known as Sergeant Swami. One day, Kadait Swami went into a shop to beg a few cents. The cashier ignored him for some time, then decided to have some fun with this old beggar. "I have a diamond ring here. If you can tell me what hand it is in, I'll give you what you ask for." The merchant put the ring in his hand and, placing his hands behind his back, switched it back and forth, then challenged the Kadait Swami to guess. The Swami declared that the ring was in neither hand. The merchant roared with laughter, thinking that he had really found a fool. Bringing both hands forward to reveal the ring, he was dismayed to find the Swami was right. The ring was gone. Kadait Swami turned and walked out of the shop, followed by the distraught merchant. After some distance, Kadait Swami halted and spat the ring out of his mouth. The fellow was flabbergasted. Kadait Swami smiled and deadpanned, "Now you are caught." At one time, a group of boys followed Kadait Swami day and night, knowing that he sometimes drank arak, the potent liquor made from palm tree juice, also known as toddy, and hoping to entertain themselves at his expense. But it was Kadait Swami who had fun with them. With the boisterous band not far behind, he visited several toddy shops, downing the potent drink. Continuing the game, Kadait Swami entered a shop where a metal worker had a pot of wax boiling on an open fire. He picked up the cauldron, drank some of the wax, then turned to offer it to the boys. But hot wax was not the intoxicating brew they had hoped would be his offering. Frightened by this bizarre spectacle, they fled down the lane, never to bother the Swami again. Many thought Kadait Swami mad. He often danced in the streets and threw money into the air. One Dipavali day in October, people were enjoying the festivities, buying new clothes for the year on this annual holy day. A merchant took his richest scarf from the shelf and gave it to Kadait Swami, who swiftly placed it on the shoulders of an approaching beggar and gave him a few coins. When asked later about this unusual gesture, he explained, That man was the king of Nepal in a previous life. Like the Siddhas of yore, his vision was not limited to this time and this place. But seeing a deeper reality came with a price, the price of being misunderstood by ordinary folks. Several times the police arrested him. As they took him away by the arms, Swami would lower his head and go along courteously. 2 constables once took him before a judge, claiming he was mad and should be committed. It was customary for officers to wait outside while defendants stood before the judge. The magistrate asked Swami some questions, to which he responded in lucid English. The two got along well, in part no doubt because Swami had once been a judge himself. Both enjoyed the conversation. The judge summoned the police and scolded, "Release this gentleman immediately. There is nothing wrong with him. He is perfectly normal." Combating Christianity. In those days, the British Christian missionaries controlled most of the education in Jaffna. They had the best schools, based in the English language, and if Hindus wanted their children to attend these schools and get the most promising education, the children had to give up wearing their traditional clothing, their holy ash and patu, submit to attending Christian religious classes, and even attend daily Mass. The insidious attempt to convert the children to Christianity was effective. Often, unbeknownst to their parents, the children slowly adopted the Christian teachings. As intended by the Christians, this strategy disrupted the Hindu unity of the family. Since they had to have a Western education to get a decent job with the British government, many were sent to the missionary schools, and among those many converted to Christianity, to their families' dismay. These innocent children would attend morning prayers in school, then share in pujas in their homes, where their family life remained true to Shaivite tradition. The compromise ruined their spiritual lives, which was exactly the missionaries' purpose. Children found themselves on 2 different paths at once, one at home with mother and another in the classroom with the nuns. What Shaivite rituals they performed were done without understanding, and what Christian services they took part in were performed hollowly as part of the daily school regimen. Kadite Swami served as a counterweight to this dogmatic onslaught. He was more articulate than any previous holy man in Sri Lanka, having been a lawyer and judge. He frequented Vanarapani Shiva temple about 2 kilometers from the marketplace, and there sang songs to Parvati. After worship, he gave rousing spiritual discourses. During his years in Jaffna, Kadite Swami spoke so often in front of the Shiva temple that a thatched pavilion was built for him there. He stood on a platform in the pavilion and lectured to hundreds of men and women who came to worship or were on their way to nearby markets. An eloquent orator, he spoke with missionary verve. Though Swami's native tongue was Telugu, he also spoke proficient Tamil, though in a dialect that was different for Sri Lankans to follow, along with Kannada, Malayalam, and English. His Padeshas about the greatness of Shaivism inspired renewed devotion to the people who were accustomed to hearing sermons only from the Christian fathers seeking to convert them. Not for a long time had someone stood so boldly in public and said what was in their heart of hearts. Kadite Swami became the voice of their heritage, the protector of Shaiva Dharma, as he boldly reminded them of the beauties and potencies of their born faith. Over the years, tens of thousands heard him speak from the Vanarpani platform, and large numbers of them were re-inspired to hold fast to their ancient ways of Shaivite Hindu life. There was during those years a learned scholar in Jaffna, 12 years Kadite Swami's younger, by the name of Arumuga Navalar, the father of Sri Lankan Tamil prose. Before him, all Tamil was written in verse form. At one point in his life, Navalar translated the Bible, which he regarded as inferior to the Hindu scriptures, into Tamil to show his people the teachings it actually contains. These 2 firebrands were deeply dedicated to preserving Shaivite culture in Sri Lanka, having clearly cognized the threats their people faced. They worked together to open several Hindu schools to offset the prevailing Christian education that so direly threatened the faith and futures of Tamil children. The first of these, known simply as Hindu High School, was begun at Vanarpani in Jaffna, by the side of the Shiva temple where Kadite Swami preached to crowds. This later became the Jaffna Hindu College, the foremost educational institution of the North. Magical moments at Mandaitivu. One day at his place in Mandaitivu, Kadait Swami was preparing lunch with two disciples, Niranjanananda Swami and Chinmayananda Swami. This was observed by Nayanar's wife. Suddenly, Kadait Swami shouted, "A karmi is coming back. Quick, we must go." Placing all the pots in a wooden box used for storing leftover foods, they ran away. Before long, a disgruntled man arrived and told the woman he was looking for Swami. He said he had just left. The man waited and waited all day, but Swami never returned. He waited for 3 days, and Nanayar's wife fed him. As soon as the man left, Swami reappeared with his two brother monks and said, "Now we can eat." They went to the storage box. The woman was thinking, "Ugh, they are going to eat spoiled 3-day-old food." As they opened the box, steam was rising from each pot as if it had just been cooked, and to the wife's astonishment, the three enjoyed a fresh hot lunch. On one visit to the island, Swami called Nanayar's family together and performed a homa in the backyard, as if doing an antyeshti funeral ceremony. They assumed Swami was performing his own last rites as a sign that he might soon leave his body. After the homa, he told them not to go to the temple for 31 days. Now this they thought is strange, because Swami is still alive. In a few days the family received news that their son had died in India during a pilgrimage to Chidambaram. Swami's magical rites all came clear. Kadait Swami's magic had a style, a kind of mystical DNA. How often he would know the events in people's lives, events happening beyond the ken of the immediate players, events that affected friends and family, events separated by space, but often not by time, and he, the knower, the intermediary of the two seemingly unconnected events, would provoke some change that defied reason. Chalapa meets Kadait Swami. One day a young sadhu came to the pavilion. His eyes revealed a profound depth, and Kadait Swami recognized something special in him. After they spent an unknown time together, Kadait Swami met his disciple in the marketplace. Fetching a rupee from a woman peanut vendor, he wrapped it in a betel leaf and gave it to the young shishya. In those days rupees were large coins. The bundle covered half the palm of the sadhu, who would later become known as Chalapaswami. Kadait Swami then struck him on the back with his umbrella and sent him away. Future devotees spoke of the coin giving as Kadait Swami's unconventional natha way of initiating his shishya into sannyasa, the state of world renunciation. Decades later, Chalapaswami's disciple Yoga Swami recounted this great spiritual experience as it was told to him. Lo, with a silver rupee coin did Kadai Swami infuse his grace on Chelapar. The world looked upon him as a madman. For his empyrean height he stood aloof, far from the madding crowd's ignoble strife. The two met often during the next 4 years and went on long walks together. Chelapa Swami said little or nothing of the time he spent with Kadait Swami, and history has almost no memory of it. Ampikaipakan offers the following anecdote. To Kadait Swami, all devotees were the same regardless of differences in race or creed, high or low, rich or poor. He treated one and all with equal affection and remedied their physical and mental ills and their poverty too. Knowing this, the devotees began to flock around him in larger numbers. There were many humble requests even from the poor to visit their homes. At such times they offered him their usual non-vegetarian meals, including liquor. Above likes and dislikes, he accepted what was offered. When this became known, there was anger and resentment amongst Orthodox Hindu Shaivites. Chalapa Swami, the guru of Shiva Yoga Swami, could not bear to hear from devotees that Kadait Swami, whom he honored, takes liquor. It was something altogether unbelievable. Wishing to test him, he went to Grand Bazaar in search of Kadait Swami with a bottle of liquor carefully concealed under his shawl. As Chalapar went and sat beside him, Swami cried, "Oh ho, so you too have begun to treat me with liquor. All right, take the bottle that you have concealed under your shawl and open it. Let me share this with you and all these devotees here." Swami, trembling, took out the bottle, but upon opening it found the bottle was empty. The dismayed disciple asked forgiveness and returned back to Nalar Tiradi. On another occasion, Swami presented a bottle of arak to Swami, saying it was time for his disciple to have his first drink. After all, did he consider himself better than his guru? Swami, unable to refuse anything his guru offered, took the bottle and tipped it up to his mouth. What had the smell of arak to his nose tasted like honey on his tongue. What to imagine of the years they shared, a powerful Siddha from South India and his inwardly inclined Shishya from Jaffna exploring the depths of consciousness, the profundities of Shaivism that were so dear to them both, but imagine is all we can do. The grand departure. During the last few years of his life, Swami ceased going back to Mandaitivu and remained in the Jaffna area. He took a liking to a small privately owned temple to Lord Nataraja in Niraviyadi, a few kilometers from the marketplace. A hut was built for him in the compound behind the temple where he stayed with Kulandaival Swami. This became his domain, a place of solitude and communion. He declared to his followers, "This is Chidambaram," referring to the renowned temple of Lord Nataraja, the cosmic dancer, in South India, which is mystically thought of as the center of the universe. It was at this spot, on October 13, 1891, Shatabhishak Nakshatra, that Swami made his great departure from this earth plane. Kulandaival Swami was with him in those final moments. He had instructed his Shishyas to enter his body in a crypt, as is often done with illumined souls. Kulandaival Swami oversaw the Samadhi ceremony and entombment at the side of his hut. Soon afterwards, a large stone was placed on the spot, and pujas to it were regularly conducted by devotees. A year later, in 1892, in keeping with Swami's orders, a sizable temple was built, enshrining a Shiva lingam from Benares, India, which took the place of the large stone. Nearly a century later, when the Samadhi temple had fallen into disrepair, a group of boys who played cricket nearby began having dreams about a tall, slim man who told them they should restore the structure. When the parents heard about the dreams, they realized it was Swami the boys had seen, and told them not to play there anymore. The boys rallied together, involved the Chettiar community, and in the early 1980s began renovating the temple. In 1983, during Satguru Shivaya Subramania Swami's, the disciple of Swami's foremost disciple, Swami, last visit to Jaffna, the Swami temple committee, mostly youth, invited him to set the first stone for a new tower above the sanctum. He climbed a rickety bamboo ladder to the top, set the stone, and a small puja was performed. The renovations continued, and the final consecration ceremony was held in 1985. Chapter 7. Swami, the Siddha of Nallur. Toward the middle of the 19th century, a farmer named Valapuram of Vadakodai married Ponnamma of Nallur. They built their home near Nallur temple and cultivated the fields. The couple had 2 girls and 2 boys, one of whom was named Chalapa. From his youth, Chalapa devoted himself one-pointedly to the pursuit of the divine within himself. He was so introverted that his parents thought him addled. Eccentric as he was, Chalapa was a pure person, strict with himself and others. By all accounts, he was born a yogi. People had predicted sannyasa for him even as a youngster. He would never ask for things, even food or clothing. If he wasn't given what he needed, he went without. He had no friends. In fact, he went to any length to hide from people, spending every free minute alone. He was close to no one. His family never knew what he was thinking, nor could they coax him out of his shell. He only withdrew all the more from their efforts. As a young man, he had to be taken to school, or he wouldn't go. Once there, he would sit through the day hearing and speaking nothing. It was sheer torment for everyone. His classmates mocked him, and his teachers punished him constantly for this. His teachers punished him constantly for his daydreaming. but nothing they did brought his mind down to earth. At home he habitually sat quietly apart from others, lost in his thoughts or meditating, much to his parents' dismay. They felt he was too serious and told him he should laugh and play like other children. He attended a Tamil primary school called Shaiva Prakasha Vidyasalai at Kantharmadam, a mile from Nallur Temple. By the time he was 16, Chalapa's peculiar distance from people was so pronounced that he routinely went for days without speaking to anyone at all. His parents feared something was seriously wrong with him, and from time to time took him to various doctors, astrologers, and other learned men seeking a sensible diagnosis. No one could help them understand their boy. His health was sound, though he was unusually thin, but no one knew his aloof mind. Nonetheless, he attended Jaffna Central College, a secondary school where the medium of instruction was English. Later, Chalapa took the wandering away into the countryside to a far-off temple of Later, Chalapa took to wandering away into the countryside to a far-off temple or village where his family would inevitably find him after a desperate search, meditating under a tree or aimlessly walking the roads. He patiently bore with their pleading and punishments, but before long wandered off again. They learned finally to let him go. He would turn up hungry and tired after a week or two. It moved his mother to tears, and she prayed for him all her life. A penchant for solitude. After leaving school, Chalapa worked as a night watchman guarding a building adjacent to a cremation ground, spending the whole night outside in the weather, making an occasional circuit of the property. He was in his late teens at the time. His parents had resigned themselves to his austere predilections, yet he managed to appall them even farther. It seems that after perfunctorily checking the building he was hired to watch, he would enter the cremation yard and sit through the night meditating, often near a still-smoking pyre. It is said he later worked at a small government office, but his penchant for solitude overcame his need for a salary. K.C. Kulartnam gave details of this period in Yalpana Nallur Terati Chalapa Kuvamikal, translated by Dr. Vimala Krishna Pillai as Chalapa Swami of Nallur. Chalapa discontinued his studies after some years and commenced his employment as an Arakai, public relations officer at the Jaffna Kacheri District Secretariat. Being a very efficient worker, he received the admiration and the confidence of the authorities and was many a time entrusted to be in charge of the treasury. Though Chalapa enjoyed the high prestige of a privileged post, he was not enamored by it. He was ever dwelling on the inner kindling of his being. Irresistibly drawn towards Jnanam spiritually, there appeared changes in his habits, dress, and movements. Irresistibly drawn towards Jnanam spirituality, there appeared changes in his habits, dress, and movements. This intrigued many. Outwardly, he carried on with his normal work without giving any room for others to talk about it. Inwardly, during the night, when others were all fast asleep, he was engaged in mystic communion with Lord Murugan of Nallur and began to prate, "Father, Father." When this flood of Jnanam surged and overflowed outwardly, he appeared like a madman, like one possessed by the spirits, like an innocent child. He would speak to himself, repeat Om, Om, shaking his head, raise his right hand high, wave and shout loudly. He would not let anyone get close to him. He chased them away as they approached him. He neglected his job and finally left the kacheri. He then sat all day in the corner of his hut. Seeing him withdraw more and more into states they interpreted as aberrant, his relatives arranged special pujas for him in which the priests tried to exorcise the spirits they assumed had possessed him. To no avail, Chalapa was unmoved by all the fuss and unfazed by not being understood. On occasion, he even took advantage of being thought mad. It could be his ticket to do just as he pleased, to wander or be a hermit, as and when he was moved to. He would mix with the sadhus of Sri Lanka, listen to their stories, and watch quietly as they debated philosophical intricacies. These were the things that engaged his mind. Understandably, the question of Chelapa's marrying never came up, and when he met his Satguru, Swami, he was perfectly free to follow him. Released, if reluctantly, by his family and society at large, he lived as a sannyasin from his early 20s. His already intense inner life was so heightened by the spiritual transformation his guru wrought within him that his relatives hardly knew him, nor did he know them from strangers. Everything about him changed and changed again. In a very short time, Swami carried him to the heights of God realization, but Chelapa was a long time adjusting to the aftermath of this profound non-experience. He spent long hours in deep meditation near the portico adjacent to the Nallur temple Tiradi, a large shed in which Lord Murugan's ornate festival chariot is stored, 45 meters from the temple entrance. It was in those days a thatched chamber, about 12 meters tall and 6 meters on a side, housing the wooden parade chariot with its 2-meter-high wheels and other parade paraphernalia, which were brought out only during major festivals. In front stood a 3-sided open pavilion bordered by a wrought iron fence. He read of the eminent history and grandeur of Nallur, Jaffna, and Sri Lanka in Chelapa Swami of Nallur. Our country, Lanka, land of Shiva, glows like gold in the Indian Ocean. The Tamil word Elam means gold. Saint Tirumular, in his Tirumantaram, has said that this Elankai, Lanka island, is an abode of Shiva. There were many Iswaran temples dedicated to Lord Shiva in this land, and many Siddhas lived and roamed this land. The traditions of the Siddha Parampara are deep-rooted here. The greatness of these saints who immerse their minds at the feet of Lord Shiva is beyond comprehension. Samadhi temples of these great Siddhas abound in the Jaffna Peninsula and throughout the northern province. Many Jnanis and Siddhas, from Swami to Yoga Swami, have left their sacred footprints in and around Jaffna. Guru Puja Mandapams, the halls constructed near such temples, were not only centers of charity but also the seats of cultural and religious activities. Nallur, literally good place, is an ancient city in Jaffna. It was the capital city of Emperor Arya Chakravarti, whose sovereignty, 1215 through 1240, was widespread. In fact, Ramaswamy in Tamil Nadu was under his administration, and he earned the title Sethu Kavalar, the protector of Sethu, the isthmus between Tamil Nadu and Jaffna. It was in Nallur that pure, refined Tamil and Shaivaneri, the Shaiva path, flourished. Situated very close to the king's ancient palace was the Nallur Kandaswami, Sanskrit Skandaswami, the temple of Lord Murugan. Around this temple, in the 4 directions, were built the sentinel temples for protection: Beyilukanda, Pilayar Kovil in the east, Kalaisanatha Satanatha Kovil in the south, Kalaisanatha Shivan Kovil in the west, Virakali Aman Kovil in the north, and Satanatha Kovil in the south. The royal flag and the royal seal carried in the insignia the symbol of the Nandi, which was continued by successive kings. Though the Portuguese destroyed the Nallur Kandaswami Kovil and even uprooted the foundation, there was a Shaiva revival during the Dutch rule around 1734. During this period there lived several bards and poets who composed great religious hymns. Thus Nallur was once again flooded with religious wisdom, jnanam. Srimat Raghunatha Mapana Mudaliyar, who was holding a high position in the Jaffna Kacheri, appealed to the Dutch and got their permission to set up a Vel Kotam, where the Vel, the insignia of Lord Murugan, could be installed for worship. Nallur Temple was a center of life for Chelapa Swami, an ancient Murugan temple with a Shakti Vel enshrined within its innermost sanctum. It is even today the most prominent Hindu temple of the Jaffna Peninsula, some say because of the presence of the lineage. Kadait Swami visited Chelapa Swami there often, and together they went on long walks and meditated at out-of-the-way places. One afternoon, on a particularly scorching day, while Chelapa Swami was sitting in the shade of the Nallur compound, he suddenly put up his umbrella and held it there as if he were in the sun. 10 minutes later, Kadaitswami arrived, and Chalapaswami put the umbrella down. Witnesses surmised that Chalapaswami had felt his guru coming and put up his umbrella to mystically shelter him from the hot sun as he walked, in the guise of a madman. In the weeks following Kadaitswami's departure from the earth plane, Chalapaswami lost all outward coherence, behaving like a madman, wild and unpredictable. He sat in the Nalur Tiradi portico for days and nights, motionless, hardly breathing, showing no hunger or thirst. He was an awesome figure, living in another world, yet physically he was awkward, with protruding teeth and thin, hay-colored hair. People brought offerings of camphor, fruit, and flowers and sat blissfully at his feet. He spent so much time there that people referred to him as Nalur Siddhar, or Tiradi Siddhar. He sat, meditated, and ate in the shade of the bilva tree near the entry. At some point he took up use of a hut with clay walls and thatched roof across the road from the Tiradi, in a corner of his sister Chalachi's property. For some time she brought meals for him, but he would shout, "Go, take it away. You have brought me poisoned food." He cooked his own meals at the hut and slept there or on the concrete steps of the Tiradi on a thin straw mat, living a simple life that would have great impact on others, that would in fact change the future of Shaivism in Sri Lanka. When he wasn't in samadhi, his demeanor was fierce. He threw things at anyone who approached for blessings, running and shouting after people who merely looked at him twice. People kept their distance, not comprehending this amazing being, yet sure somehow that he was special.